Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and good evening, everybody. So, we're a relatively young organisation. Officially, we've been in existence for 8 months, but we're growing very, very quickly. And what I thought I'd do tonight is just share with you a little bit about where we are so far, what our thinking is, and because we're a young organisation and still in formation, get your views and feedback and wisdom and advice on what we ought to be doing. So I'll kind of work through where we've come from, what we're doing, and what we're planning to do in the future. So we're one of a clutch of these new Catapult centres set up by the UK government. And the thinking behind them is can the government put a little bit more effort and money into making this nation better at innovation? There's a sort of perceived wisdom here that we're great at R&D and invention, and we have the kind of, some of the best universities in the world. We're pretty good at running companies, and many of which you guys work for, but in between, something dies. And, the kind of commercialization and the IP goes somewhere else. And, I think the best recent example is graphene. People know graphene, that wonder material that we, the British, discovered in Manchester University and has so many potential uses. And something like 112 patents in China and 240 in the US and none here. And I know patents aren't everything, but it's kind of part of that picture that we don't do the best job of taking our knowledge base and turning it into commercial reality. So we're sort of here as satellites to bridge the gap between conception and commercialization. And we're in quite diverse topic areas. And what they have in common is that the government felt like these areas that we could be a global leader, but there was some kind of market failure. So if it's an area where we're doing brilliantly anyway, like fashion or advertising, whatever, you don't need a catapult. But my colleagues in stem cell therapies, their market failure is it can take 20 years to get a medicine from university out to being used and curing and helping people. So how do they shorten that? And we've got satellite applications, offshore renewables, and the one I've got is cities. So why cities? Behind it, I think, are two factors. First of all, the demographics. And we know, demographics don't really lie. We know from the demographics that we're going to be living in an urban world. And we're seeing the biggest rural-urban migration in the history of humanity, and cities in Asia, in China, and India doubling in size every 10 years. So that's a huge opportunity, but also a huge pressure. And people are going to have to find ways to satisfy the demand for that infrastructure. And that's a big business opportunity, but also a challenge to innovate. Here in the UK, it's a bit different. We've already largely built our towns and cities, but we face another kind of pressure here, which is that, that public spending and money going to local authorities and cities is going steadily downwards, yet the things they have to spend on adult social care and dependent care and so on are going steadily upwards. So we're not going to want to pay a whole load of more taxes. So I think both this country and the world have this thing in common, that the demands on our infrastructures and services are going to outstrip our ability to pay for them. The only way through that is to be more efficient and clever at how we use them. And that's the kind of thinking behind, you hear the term smart cities and so on, that how do you take your existing infrastructure and lay intelligence over it in such a way that you use it more effectively, and that's the business opportunity. So we've got this new innovation centre. We're based in central London. There was some of the cities around the UK were upset about that, but I think the decision was made before I came that London is the portal and it is the global brand, and actually it's where the biggest cluster of expertise is. So we're here. We have funding from the UK government for the first 5 years and an expectation of long-term funding, but also now money coming in from other sources, companies and foundations. And we're all about collaboration, about how do we pull universities, cities, companies together to tackle complex challenges and do that, that innovation that we need. And I kind of, what I'm going to be judged on at the end, I guess, is have we helped to grow the market and enable it and make it bigger in ways that have benefited guys like you who want to sell into it. And I kind of have a sense that one of the things that we're fighting against in the city space and the smart city space is a series of market failures, that everyone kind of thinks and talks about a very exciting city market in cities and new ways of doing things and so on. But by and large, I look around and people aren't quite making the money that they expect from this. And so we are going to be working on all the new exciting innovations, but we're also going to be working quite a lot on how do we tackle the market failures, build confidence, get financing, tackle procurement barriers and so on, such that the existing good ideas actually get applied in cities. Because I don't know if any of you are from cities. I think most of you are from companies, but those of us that work with cities, they're often their own worst enemy. And we say we don't have enough resources and it's difficult to do. Yet they run themselves in silos and they're short term, and one bit of the city does something that just passes a problem on to somebody else, that passes a problem on to somebody else, so make life easier for the car, create an air quality problem which makes people less healthy, which passes on a problem to someone else. And we're trying to think about, are there ways we can focus on make our cities more joined up and intelligent in the way that they function. And it's not an easy thing, because our cities have been like this for decades, and people have ways of being and kind of institutional barriers. But one of the new things we have on our side in this effort is the whole big data and new technology opportunity. And this one at the top is my favourite fact at the moment, which is that of all the data information created anywhere in human history, 80% of it created in the last 2 years. So if you think about that fact for a moment, that's an exponential growth. You know, next time I give that figure, it will be the last 18 months and so on. It will get closer and closer and closer. And that's because we're all of us carrying around in our pockets, you know, these devices that produce information, and the Internet of Things means that intelligence is embodied in all sorts of objects and buildings, and it talks to each other, and it creates clouds of stuff. And from our way of thinking, that cloud of new data is like a new raw material, you know, that allows us to innovate and do things differently. And you think about cities, and cities are complicated and difficult places to understand. But can this data help us think about resource use and infrastructure and behaviours in cities in ways that allow us to remodel them and do things differently? You know, about a few hundred yards from here in Soho, 150 years ago, Dr. John Snow, he found the cause of cholera. Okay, and what he did it by overlaying two data sets, two simple data sets: the households that the cholera was found in and where the water pumps were. So spatially, two data sets, a huge insight that led to a revolution in public health and the growth of our cities. Now we have hundreds and thousands of data sets that we can layer and interrogate and gain insight from. So, you know, if that guy can do that 150 years ago, what can we start doing today with those insights? So that's one of the things that we're asking the question. And there's potential there, but it's, again, not quite coming together. And a Cambridge professor was saying to me the other day, he said, one of the problems in this agenda is that if you buy a new car at the moment, there's more intelligence in that car than there is the road it drives on, the tunnel it goes under, and the bridge it goes across. So that when that car is running out of petrol, a little thing tells you that, yet we still have whole bridges and tunnels collapsing out there suddenly, because we still haven't, in areas of our cities and lives, distributed that intelligence and found ways to gain that data such that we can start to manage and run it more efficiently. So that's part of what we're thinking. And the main facility that I'm investing my money in is this, what we're calling our Cities Lab. And this is effectively a big data facility and platform which will be here in central London that people can come and play on and experiment and work with. We hope that kind of new industries and so on will grow up and innovations will grow up around it. And if you imagine this lab having kind of three bits, the first bit is that we get the data in, and it's only as good as the data sets that we get. So we're working with cities around the country, Glasgow, Manchester, Bristol, and now London, to have data stores and data platforms. So they collect all their data, put it on open platforms so that people can start to use that as an innovation tool. Plus, we're putting our own sensors and beacons and ways of capturing data out there in the city so that we can pull that in. So have a rich set of data. You can do the analytics, the layering, the mashing, and then we can visualize that and tell stories around it. And our hope is that if you're a city leader at the moment and someone's talking to you about Internet of Things and big data and smart cities and so on, at the moment, they're kind of sitting there and not buying. mostly city leaders, because they lack the information and the confidence to be an intelligent customer and client. So one of the things that we aim to do is bring those people into the cities lab with their problems and their challenges, get them to play, ask questions and support them so that they can go back out to the market more intelligently and think, okay, this is what I need. And we're developing now some quite sophisticated city models, so we can do all the what-ifs on land use, transport, housing, population, and so on. If we go down this pathway, what does it mean to all those other variables and so on? So that will be a kind of a resource for UK industry and cities and small businesses to come and use and play with to do that. The other thing that we're doing is drawing on what I call the kind of the ecosystem of knowledge. And I've been around the world since I started the job to kind of look at what New York's doing and Singapore and Chicago and Berlin, and there's lots of great stuff going. But I kind of sincerely think that the ecosystem of organisations around London in particular, but the UK more widely, is as good as anywhere in the world. We have, you think about the cities work in our London universities, LSE, City Centre, Bartlett School at UCL, and the Imperial Engineering guys. Any three of those are in the top 10 globally, as far as I'm concerned, on cities. And then you have the Arup's and the Atkins and the Bureau Happols, and some of you are probably in the audience, and the best architecture firms in the world, construction companies, law, financing, and so on. London as a global brand, and our kind of growing kind of tech and innovation culture here in London, have all those kind of raw materials and ingredients to do that innovation. And I think for complex city problems, you're going to need lots of different people to come together to do the innovation, and lots of different people to come together to apply it in city context. So we're thinking about how do we create that richness. And I have an innovation centre which we're refurbishing at the moment on Clerkenwell Green, where we're going to be based. And I sort of want that centre to embody that we're going to have secondees in from academia and companies and people from all sorts of different disciplines working together there, and hopefully kind of those different backgrounds and approaches bumping into each other and creating interesting things. Our programme areas, these are sort of the four ways that we're looking at this. So the first one is about how do we put the intelligence out there into cities? How can we layer sensors and beacons and get the data from cities that give you that raw material? It's a bit like kind of putting electric wiring out there that allows you to do all those other things. And we have a number of projects around that at city scale and at major development scale, and I'll come on to. The second then is you take all that information and those platforms, and you look at how can you innovate new products and services, and how can you kind of prototype them and support them and bring them through to market. The third thing is, how do you prove it? So you've got these kind of concepts and ideas, and people want to know, will that work at city scale, and how do I know? So we're doing the prove it through the lab, as I described, that we'll do big city scale tests in the laboratory, but also big pilot projects out there in the city that people can come and kick the tires, look under the bonnet and say, yeah, does this stuff work? And then fourthly, this what I talked about, the kind of barrier removal and helping to make the market and unlock the market, and having a particular focus on finance. Because when we went around and talked to everybody, they all said financing is a problem and an opportunity, because you go to the city and they say, well, actually, we've got a lot of money looking for a home and we can't get a decent return, particularly a kind of long-term steady return. And then you go to the cities and they say we have huge infrastructure needs, long-term, and fairly stable and steady return, and can't get any money. And so we're kind of working quite hard on how do you kind of get those resources flowing. And some of it's to do with asset classes. And in smart cities, we're mixing IT and property and infrastructure, all of which have different returns and different expectations. So can we create new asset classes around that? Some of it's around the modelling and the proof and so on, but it's also around what we're calling investable propositions of how can we support cities to come up with propositions that make sense to blended finance and financiers. Because at the moment, largely they don't. They're used to public sector funding, and they kind of, used to reporting on a certain set of metrics that don't make sense necessarily to people looking for a return. So that's the 4 areas that we're working on. You can sort of see a flow through those, and hopefully they feed off each other. We've got, as I say, we're only 8 months old. We've got 4 projects up and running already, because I just thought that if I wait till I've got everything built and so on before I start doing any work, then it'll be 3 years and ministers will be saying, what have you done? So in Manchester, we've got a big project where we're helping them understand what data they have, how they can use that for economic development and doing things differently in the city. Cities Unlocked is a project I really like, with guide dogs for the blind, Microsoft, Network Rail, Transport for London. And we're looking at how new technology can help blind people navigate the city in different ways. So we remove social exclusion and we bring them into society. And of course, there's a lot of blind people and partially sighted people around the world. So not only does it do good, but there's a big potential market there. And you know, the chief technology officer of Microsoft said, you know, if we innovate for blind people, we're also innovating for old people, by the way, and people with other disabilities and kids. So you hope that the things coming through, some which we can talk about quite soon, will do that. Sensing London, we've doubled the number of air quality sensors across London. We're getting a rich new set of data, which we're using to innovate, and we're doing that in the Royal Parks. They have no idea how parks are used, and we've covered covering Hyde Park with a bunch of new sensors. And with Lend-Lease, Elephant and Castle, we're doing work with them to gain a whole set of new data. Already some new innovations and ideas coming through. And the one I just want to talk to a little bit more is the MK Smart one, MK standing for Milton Keynes. And in Milton Keynes, we're part of a consortium which is the local authority, the Open University, BT, ARM, who make the chips in those iPhones that many of us have in our pockets, and a couple of other companies. And what we've done there is get from Ofcom have given us the redundant TV analog channels. So we moved our TV over to digital. We've got those old channels sitting there, and they're a great bandwidth because they go through walls and everything. They kind of get everywhere. So what we're doing is ARM are putting sensors out across the city in strategic places. BT are putting the masts up and so on, and we're creating basically the capability for the sensors to talk to, to the bandwidth, and for us to take that data and information and do things differently. And the first use case that we're doing there, some of you will know this story already, but others won't, which is about smart parking. Okay, and in most major cities, around 25% of the downtown traffic is people driving round and round and round looking for a parking space. Okay, that's the reality that's been measured. Now that's not good in lots of ways, as you might imagine. So you get these little sensors, and they cost a couple of quid each, and you put them in the parking bays, and they tell you a very simple thing: is it full? Is there a car in it or not? That information can then get sent to a central point. Someone clever develops a little app that goes into either your sat nav or your mobile phone, tells you where parking spaces are, and that has 3 benefits. Benefit 1 is that less air quality and CO2 because people are driving less. 2, happier drivers because you're not driving around frustrated. But also for the local authority, more of your parking space is full more of the time because you've used intelligence to distribute the demand more intelligently across the infrastructure. And that's the kind of story behind a lot of what we do. We've got the existing infrastructure. There's often huge peaks or inefficient use. How do you use data and intelligence, new apps and new businesses to distribute that demand across that existing infrastructure more intelligently? And we're doing a bunch of other interesting stuff in Milton Keynes, which I can talk about if we get the chance. So last slide, really, I think. So just about a few thoughts about most of you in kind of construction and related industries about how we might collaborate. So the first is this one about using data and instrumentation to make projects more efficient. And one of the things I'm finding about working with cities, and I guess in some ways this is obvious, but in cities it's often difficult to find who's in charge, who can make the decision, particularly in a kind of joined up way, because there's lots of public institutions and private and all sorts of other things. But on large development projects, which are like cities in miniature sometimes, especially the big ones, there is generally someone in charge with a budget and a plan and a timetable, and they're assembling resources and people. So we're looking in particular, talking to a number of the major development projects around the country to think about how can we put some of this intelligence, help put this intelligence into the scheme and make it more effective and joined up in how it operates, and how can we use data to help people make wiser decisions about what they're going to do. The second area is we have a big mission to help SMEs in particular exploit and take advantage of this new market. And many major construction companies also kind of have a desire to work in their supply chain with small businesses and local businesses and so on, and it's often part of contracting. So we're starting to kind of map and gather together and understand who's doing what and who's good in which areas, and we want to play a brokerage role there so we can help people access those good SMEs. And in all our big projects, we have the Intels and the Microsofts and the Lend-Leases and so on in there, but we always try and have 3 or 4 small companies that have got breakthrough products involved as well. Next one is about that role of bringing people together. And I think our experience so far, and again, we're new, but a lot of what we do is actually the boring legwork and the running around, because if you're going to make something interesting and new happen, you have to try a bit harder than doing it the old way. And someone has to do the shuttle diplomacy or, you know, put a little bit of oiling the wheel money in or something. And that's partly what we see our job as. So where there is an opportunity because someone's got a great new technology, or there's a pot of money, or there's a new development site, see what we can assemble around that to unlock more stuff. Innovative financing, I talked about. It's an area of big interest for us, and we've been tasked with doing a little study for government about you know, what should they be doing on innovative financing for infrastructure. So we may well be talking to you guys about that. And then finally, so actually working at the city scale, I think more and more people, whether they're doing individual houses or pieces of energy or pieces of infrastructure, are starting to think about how do these fit into a kind of neighbourhood and wider citywide view. And people are kind of taking that citywide view, and we hope that we can help you and work alongside you to make that happen. So my time is up, and my final slide, which is not on here, was going to have my contact details. But my final slide was just to say, 8 months old, we're an innovation centre, and I think part of the good thing about being an innovation centre, we're a little bit at arm's length from government. They've given us some money, but they've also made us a private company and said, go and take some of the risks that, you know, they find it difficult to take. So we're experimenting, and I ought to fail on some stuff, really, otherwise I'm probably not experimenting enough. And we're going to learn and change and develop as we go forward. And it may be that what I've set out there looks radically different in 2 or 3 years' time because the market says, actually, we want something else, or experience shows us that. But what I'm trying to say is that we are up for listening, learning, and developing as we go forward. So when it comes to the discussion, happy to you know, talk through things and listen to your ideas, and also subsequently drop us a line, get in touch, because we want to help collaboration and engagement happen. Thank you.